right, joining us today is Andrew Peel, myself, Kelly Fisher, and our guest, Mike Cairns. Mike works with Innotech Windows and Doors, who we have supported with Passive House component certification. Today we're going to be learning more about who Innotech are and their journey towards Passive House components. First, we'd like to start off with a bit of an introduction about Mike and his experience with Windows and Doors, and generally his experience in the industry. So Mike brings nearly 3 decades of construction and fenestration experience to his role at Innotech. His combined technical experience, hands-on experience, and passion for sustainable construction ensures the windows and doors in every project are engineered and installed to exceed each project's performance requirements. Mike is a certified Passive House tradesperson. He sits on the Passive House Canada Manufacturers and Suppliers Committee, is Vice Chair of the Home Builders Association of Vancouver Education Committee, Chair of the Home Builders Association of Vancouver Technical Committee, and an instructor for window installation at British Columbia Institute of Technology. Welcome, Mike, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to get started with a few kind of easy questions to get you a bit comfortable. So I guess the first question that we want to ask, just as a bit of a warm-up and an icebreaker, and I often find that this is one that I struggle with just because of the industry that we work in here, but is how would your parents describe what you do?
It would depend on if you asked my father or my mother. My dad knows quite a bit about what I do in detail. I'm a second generation window guy. My mom would probably say he builds those passive things and he does these really neat windows.
That sounds about right. My mother still thinks I'm like 2 careers ago, so she's always introducing me as a cabinet maker or a millworker or furniture builder, but it's like, no, no, it's fine. But good that they understand the passive house component. That's exciting at
Hmm.
least. And I guess the next question I've got is what is the most important lesson you've learned over your career?
That's a fastball right off
Right out of
the
the
second
gate.
pitch. I think it would be probably that things can go well, things can go badly. No matter what you do, there's so many different people involved. There's so many different potential interactions and consequences that can occur on a regular basis. Not everything is under your control. So if you just do the best that you can, that's that's really what you can do. If you can go home happy at the end of the day as long as you're proud of what you did and what you tried to accomplish.
I think that's some great advice. Yeah. I especially like the part about not everything is in your control. That's a hard one to kind of come to terms with as you get older. Well, thanks for those little tidbits. Candid responses there. Um, so I guess we'll just kind of move forward then with some of the meat of the interview, and kind of get into a little bit about what we're here to talk today about.
Hmm.
So firstly, I guess, can you tell us a bit about yourself and where your passion for your work comes from? Why did you choose to get into this industry?
Yeah. Well, you could call me a classic nerd. Plenty of people certainly have over the years. I, you know, the dating site thing. I prefer a hike in the woods than a walk on the beach and a nice whiskey to a glass of wine. I live on a farm in a passive house that my father and I built ourselves. Um, as for my passion, I think I inherited it more than anything. Like my father was in the door and window business. He dealt with multiple levels from manufacturing to installation, and I've always enjoyed creating something. Whether that's art, working with wood, metal, whatever. Even like landscaping and stuff like that. Working with tools. Over time, I learned a lot about buildings and the problems that can be caused when things aren't done right. And I really enjoy being part of the solution.
Yeah, that's a great sentiment. Part of the solution. So you're the type then that has to have a project on the go or kind of something to keep you busy, hands-on, and kind of something you can see the results from.
Yeah, for the most part, I really like that. I went to school to do stuff that was more like design and management related.
Yeah.
And while I was doing that, I was paying for it and paying living expenses and things by working. And it's like I like being able to point to that thing that I built. And
I can
yeah.
resonate with that 100%. um, which is great. Okay, so moving on then. Everybody has some sort of hero's journey to get to where they are. What were some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome to get to where you are today?
Well, I guess one of the big challenges that I faced was my father and I worked together for a number of years, and when we decided to open our own company, um, starting your own business is never easy. And when we finally reached that, we kind of reached that point where we had seen a reasonable level of success, but it was still not self sufficient as a company. It was time for my father to retire, so I had to sort of make a decision like, am I willing to take a risk on this, or do I want to try and do something different? That doesn't involve that risk. And so we had to shut down this thing that we've been working for several years on building, and that was a very hard thing to do. It's like, you're kind of like putting your pet to sleep, right? Like, it's just that part of my life, all this effort, all this time, it in a way it felt like it was just thrown away. But I think in the long run, it was probably good. I had too many years of working 7 days a week, and now I do actually have the ability to have a weekend and things like that. Which, when you've got small kids, you're like, oh yeah, actually being able to, you know, recognize them when I see them is maybe a good thing.
That is a very good thing, yeah. Having that downtime is really important. It's
I
good to
might
hear.
step in with a question here of, I mean, what did you take away from that experience of having to, shut down this company you'd put so much effort into with your father, and how have you used that going forward?
I would say that in retrospect, there's always things that you can learn, and one of the things that I picked up over time was that the adaptability that we had, I think, was very, very good. We sort of changed focus as we needed to, but every time you change focus, it's expensive, and that was one of the things that was sort of problematic for the company. But at no point did I stop and analyze why we had to keep adapting. And so there were some of the fundamental concepts that were part of our original business plan that when market conditions shifted, we probably should have recognized that and said, you know what, let's just stop and create a new plan based on the changed market conditions instead of just kind of reacting to things on an ongoing basis. So that was a definite mistake, I think,
Mm.
that we made. So plan things ahead of time, and don't just react.
That's great advice. So for those listeners who don't know Innotech Windows and Doors, maybe you can kind of help us understand who you are and what gives Innotech a distinct character compared to your competitors.
Yeah, well, we're a high performance window and door manufacturer, specializing in dual action or tilt turn windows, located in Langley since 2001. What kind of makes us a little bit distinct compared to maybe some other window and door manufacturers is a combination of our deep experience and our passion for performance, and a view of the long term. Like, we're a small company of hardworking, family oriented people, and when we make decisions and try to do things, it's kind of it's not what's going to work for the next 6 months. It's what's going to work for the next 10, 20, 30 years. That resonates with me. I don't like the short term stuff.
Well, that's great. So this bleeds into our next question then, I guess. How did you come to cross paths with Passive House, and how has it impacted you on a personal level?
I did learn about it from Innotech. So it was something they had been sort of coming across and thought it might be worth looking into. I started taking courses, delving into the world of passive, and as I was learning about passive construction, the community around it, it kind of hit home for me. It's another level of that solution, not just with building security, but comfort and even at the existential level, right? Like it's a big piece of the puzzle, trying to reduce pollution and working to fight climate change. So I started building my own passive house, dug in even deeper, and now I'm that guy that can't help but talk about passive to everybody, and they probably hate it.
You've got the bug. So I guess this kind of helps us address maybe your CPHT, so your Certified Passive Host Trades designation. We had noticed that we did a bit of sleuthing on your LinkedIn profile just to understand your work experience and how you've come to working at Innotech, and saw that you were a window and door guy from the onset of your career. And we're curious about the influence that made you kind of pursue that designation. But from the answer to your previous question, it seems as though Innotech really opened your eyes to all things passive host, and you haven't turned away since.
Yeah, well, like early in my career, I was dealing with a leaky condo restoration, and there was a lot of very unfortunate learning there when it comes to building science and all of the things that can go wrong, and a lot of that really boils down to the fenestration and the level of knowledge of the people involved, and so that's definitely instilled in me a need to keep learning about things, and I certainly thought that for anyone involved in the construction of passive homes, even including the supply, and maybe particularly for people that are suppliers and manufacturers, they should have a deep knowledge of how to build them. So that was kind of like my first step into really trying to understand what makes passive different than just a house.
I guess fundamentally, then, the experience you've learned from your exposure to passive house, do you only work on passive house projects, or do you deal with other kind of high performance builds that may not achieve passive house?
Yeah, it runs the gamut for sure.
Okay.
You know,
And would you, I guess, try to apply these best practices and this experience that you've learned over the years, especially when you're going back to those days of condo renovations or fixing leaky buildings? I suppose if you had it your way, all builds would be passive house.
I mean that would be an easy thing if you could wave the wand.
Yep.
At the very least, even when I see details from projects that are maybe in the Midwest or something, and they're like, well, we're not really concerned about water. It's like, water exists everywhere on Earth, so maybe if you were in the Gobi Desert or something, then you could say that, but everywhere in North America, you need to be concerned about water at some level. And so, when I see details that are like, okay, we got hit real hard in Vancouver with this, 25, 30 years ago. So please make use of some of the knowledge that we've gained. Check out, guys like Joe Lefebrook, or the Building Science Corp, or any of these companies that have real building science knowledge and can provide some details for you that will mean that you can walk away from that job and know that 40 years later, you're not going to have a leaky building.
Yeah, that's very important. The longevity, especially with water ingress, is something that I find people often overlook, and are not overly concerned about, which is really terrifying actually, because water is such a horrible thing to have in your structure. So
Well, and the same thing with moisture. That's one of the things that I think is really beautiful with passive is a lot of the concepts that make passive work very well also apply to things like your moisture, and like stuff that applies to your comfort also affects the security of the wall assembly. And so if you're like, well, if you're going to start putting on exterior insulation to try to reduce the potential for moisture in your wall assembly, why not just put enough on the outside? Go passive.
exactly. Sometimes it's a hard one to chew on, though. I find some people would rather put the money in fancy kitchens or appliances or something, and they don't really consider the impact that has on you as an occupant. So
Yeah.
Can be an uphill battle sometimes. Okay, so I guess the next question I have here for you is, could you share the reasoning on why Innotech chose to integrate Passive House into your product offerings?
Yeah, that one's a great question. To be honest, it was really like the next logical step for Innotech. We've been manufacturing windows that are near passive performance right from the start, and had been used in multiple certified projects. So it's actually kind of funny. Like after spending years and years working to sell a window that almost everybody turns down because it's way too good for what they need, all of a sudden you get people say, "Well, yeah, that's really good, but do you have something better?" All right.
That's exciting. What so was kind of moving towards Passive House part of like you said, it was more of a natural next step, but was it part of an overarching mission for the company as a whole to get more into high performance building and all of the whole gambit that comes along with it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't actually know off the top of my head the mission statement for the company, but I know that one of the main, like the focus of the company has always been about the performance of the products that they build. The founder got into window manufacturing because of the poor quality of the windows that were available on the market at the time when he was building his own home. And so it's always been this drive to produce something that's actually going to make homes more comfortable, more livable, more secure, make fenestration better. So, the point that we were manufacturing at was the top tier in North America for so long. Now that Passive House is, really basically once Passive House started making its way into the North American market, then that provided a new top tier to work towards that just didn't exist before. So then, eventually it made sense that, yeah, we kind of have to be in that new top tier.
So how was the approval attained to proceed with Passive House certification? Maybe you can walk us through a bit of that process if you've got much you can shed on.
The internal decision to go for like to build a Passive House window wasn't that hard. This is the next evolution. This is your next generation product. But the certification was obtained with a bunch of assistance. So we purchase profiles from a manufacturer in Germany. That profile manufacturer went ahead and built a window and profile system that was certified. So we used that system to certify our own window, which saved us a lot in terms of time and cost. I think it did, anyway.
So a bit of backstory then. Do you still use that profile then for the windows that you fabricate now then, correct?
No, we have moved beyond that profile system. Yeah.
So you've taken all of that development under your own umbrella now then at Innotech, the profile and all of the whole kind of configuration and manufacturing process?
Well, the manufacturing process always was. That's what we do. They just build the profile, so they did build a window, but they don't build windows. So it's
Yeah, they just do the extruded parts. Yeah.
yeah.
So I guess when you originally went for Passive House certification on your components, and it was something that you wanted to proceed with to be relevant in that top tier market in North America, did you have any projects lined up, or was this just something that you were like, we'll build the product and then the people will come?
Yeah, if the field of dreams, right?
Yeah.
We pretty much we actually had no projects lined up at all. We had a couple of people ask about it, and we did, of course, see that that was on the horizon. So that was part of my game. Really was to take that ball and find the market for it.
So I guess then, if you were tasked with taking this product to the market and saying, look, we've got a Passive House product, give me some projects. Would that then make you the internal Passive House champion, or was there somebody else behind the scenes that you kind of collaborated with or assisted with the process?
Well, I am the internal champion, but it started out. It was actually we've got a brilliant marketing lead, Jessica, who recognized the potential for Passive House in the market, and so she pushed really hard to get the ball rolling initially, and so I was the guy that got the handoff, and so it's kind of like for me to push on the technical side of things, and then of course try to open up that market we didn't yet have.
So I guess after certifying your first products, so I guess possibly right around the time you joined Innotech or slightly before, there were already Passive House certified components, and the route that Innotech had taken previously was to go with the Passive House Institute for certification. The more recent products you've had certified, you've decided to work with Peel Passive House to certify these products. Maybe can you speak a little bit to why you chose this path to go with us as part of that effort?
Yeah, I would say that, let's call it the abridged certification process that we originally went through. It left us with some knowledge gaps. So our concentration was on the manufacturing side, finding the best possible combination of hardware components, determining our constraints, testing and improving the structure, the air, the water, the durability, all of that stuff. So, any questions that we had about the thermal values of the product were all covered by people other than us. So we understood the basics, but had a hard time providing deeper answers about those, like the thermal performance, and lacked the requisite knowledge to make the continuing improvements that are a big deal for us. I really like to push the envelope. Like there's always room to improve. You can have something that's great, but it's never perfect. So it's also important to provide a complete package if at all possible. I think like to know what all of the needs are and how you can meet them. And windows and doors aren't just individual products. They're a system. Like they have to be designed and engineered, and the system has to have a bunch of different components that meets a bunch of different needs. So I needed an expert to tell me what those needs are. So it was great. Peel was able to teach us a lot, improve our product, meet the certification. So to me, it was 100% the right way to go.
So that's great to hear. What impact has having the Passive House certified products had on the company?
It's been huge. It's great. It's always a process. Everybody learns at a different pace, and everybody has a different focus in the company. People that are in different departments will have a different idea of what will make the product better, will make the company better, that sort of thing. But I think on the whole, people are over time they're seeing the benefits of the Passive House system. They're seeing how much better the Passive House window is, especially once they're starting to see some Passive House projects and seeing, feeling and experiencing that difference. It's neat to see that evolving mindset that, the product we made was good, but it wasn't the best that it could possibly be. And now we're pushing towards that.
So have you been able, has having your product certified made you able to bid on more projects as a window supplier? And are you winning more Passive House projects with your improved line of products?
Yeah, it definitely has opened up a significant number of opportunities. Locally here, BC Housing is doing a fantastic job of working to a higher standard. The City of Vancouver is doing an amazing job of providing benefits. They've got huge FSR bonuses for building to Passive House. So there's a lot of developers that are going that route to get the extra square footage. A lot of the social housing projects are going in that direction. And without a certified product, we really would have no ability to work on any of those projects. In terms of winning projects, certainly, yes, we are doing a lot more projects. So we are winning more. I don't really look at ratios, like win percentages and that sort of thing. I just kind of focus on projects and providing the solution, and hopefully people agree with what I propose to them. And I think when it comes to commercial stuff, win ratios tend to be fairly low, and I get too competitive. It would just feel like somebody's giving me a negative response, like, oh, you only won 30%, or whatever the number
Yeah.
is, right? I don't look at that.
Yeah, so maybe the next question then is probably might be off your radar, but the ratio between passive house projects and or passive house products and your and other Innotech products, like um, is there a wide disparity there now between with what people are asking for from your product line?
Well, the Passivos product is still it's the smaller component of volume, but it is increasing rapidly, and I can see it becoming, I'd say, call it 50-50 between our legacy line and the Passive House line within the next year or two. I can definitely see that happening, and overall unit volume is up considerably. Sales volume, whatever you want to call it, it's like we are building more windows than we ever have before. Um, we're building more of the legacy windows, and then we're also building a whole pile of Passive House certified windows on top. So
That's exciting. Um,
yeah.
would you or could you attribute any of the uptick in sales um, to in relation to the brand awareness that you've received from your passive house certification, or is it just maybe other marketing streams that would be allocated to that?
No, there's definitely been an impact. I mean, it's not the kind of thing I would be able to quantify. That's not.
Yeah.
I'm not the marketing person, but there's definitely a sense. I mean, there's an awful lot of people, particularly for me. I'll get architects or passive house designers calling me to talk about the products because they either saw it, through passive house projects that they're familiar with, or they saw it on the components database, and whether the project they do is passive or near passive, or a high step code level, something like that. They said because they know we have a certified product, then they are aware that we have this obviously high level of thermal performance. So if we have something that's, call it a step down, it's still going to be significantly above base code level. So there is definitely awareness attributed or associated to the Passive House certification.
That's awesome to hear. Now, maybe you might be able to speak to this question. I'm not sure, but would you be able to speak to any other benefits that you've realized from certification that were unforeseen?
Well, I mean, I would say the learning that we had through the process, learning about all of the little details and just how critical different things are, and how unimportant certain things were that we had sort of estimated. Oh, this is probably the weak point. No, that part's fine. This other thing that's what you need to focus on. Oh, interesting. And some of that was kind of a surprise to us because it's a little bit different than all of the call it traditional window weak points. Thermal and structure, you could almost say that they exist on opposite ends of the pendulum. Something that has the highest structure has the worst thermal, and vice versa. So things that we were always focused on improving to make a window better in the past usually had a very heavy bent towards structural. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, when we're identifying weak points, it's very different areas as a result.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of loop back to when you're comparing how different, or I guess your product would improve. Coming from a builder or fabricator, you're always looking to be like, how can this window, structurally stay together? But from the passive house stream, it is most certainly what is the thermal performance. That's generally one of the main things we care about. So that alone must have been a bit of an eye opener for your design and your fabrication process.
That's the part that gets really tricky, and That was our first major delve into development of the product. When we first released it, we did not have a good way to reinforce it. So we could determine a fantastic structure for the white product, but every material has its pros and cons, and one of the limitations of PVC is the rate of linear expansion that you'll get. Once you start building very large products, you can get some linear expansion that'll cause problems. The white product is very reflective to heat, but if you throw colors on it, then you start to get additional heat buildup that you're going to have issues with. Hardware, with being able to operate it cleanly, with your seals staying intact for air and water. So that was something we would not compromise on. So we only had a white product. But the vast majority of projects we work on require an exterior color, and we had to come up with a way to reinforce it that we could add in that structure without the huge thermal problems caused by a big steel reinforcement like we ordinarily use. And so we did manage to come up with something. Our profile manufacturer managed to come up with something, but there was a lot of kind of poking from us to make that happen. And we're really happy with the way everything worked out in the end. But it was a lot of work to try to get towards that. But it's that trying to find that balance. Where can we add structure where it's not going to compromise the thermal? What can we use for structure that's not going to be a compromise to structure? And yeah,
it's a delicate process, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lots of back and forth.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. So what advice would you give to other manufacturers who might be thinking about getting their opponents certified to Passive House standards?
Get help from an expert. Like, I can't stress enough the value that's provided. To be honest, there is a requisite level of knowledge just to understand the questions that you have to ask to be able to work through the process effectively. Like, it's one thing to be able to certify a product, but to make the product the best that you can make it, those are I would say those are two radically different concepts. Certification makes it very, very, very good, but just good enough to pass certification may not be the best that you could possibly do if you put your mind to it.
That's great advice, yeah. What would be something surprising that you learned about the Passive House industry? Anything related to your journey with component certification that you could share with those who listen to this?
Well, I say the first thing that was surprising was that Passive House doesn't actually mean house; it means building.
That always catches everybody.
Yeah. The real learning, the things that the fact that we learned from doing the certification, that was the big surprise. That was the big takeaway. That was a great thing. After working through the certification process with the folks at Peel, we now have an internal technical department that does thermal modeling and stuff, so we can continuously improve the product wherever possible and develop new products and new systems ourselves. And there's I can confidently say that would have probably taken at least 5 years to try to develop that knowledge. Just like, okay, let's just buy the software and see what we can figure out.
Yeah, that's always an uphill battle. But definitely having those subject matter experts on hand is really beneficial to the learning process, because oftentimes when you're starting out, you don't know what you don't know, and having somebody to help and guide you through that process is really integral to, as you say, building the best product that you can.
Well, and I think it's a really important thing, getting that knowledge up front. because I've definitely heard some horror stories from designers and architects that we're working with about things where it's like time to certify, and oh, where's the paperwork on this, where's the value on that, where's the number on this, and it's, oh, we didn't know any of that is needed. Hey, oh no, yes, we need it. Then
Yeah,
you're trying to work through a bunch of stuff that we were able to kind of get ahead of the game on a lot of that.
I often hear those horror stories of projects not being able to certify after they're built, and I'm just thinking to myself, what went wrong? Like, there's got to be a way to fix that and to remedy it so that we don't have these problems existing on other projects, because passive house needs to work in order for a lot of things to make sense in the future with climate change. So it is going to be a bit of an uphill battle in some regards, I think, but we'll get there eventually. It's my dream, um,
Yeah,
for all buildings to be passive house, which would be exciting.
yeah.
So maybe you can speak a little bit about any projects you're working on right now. Have you got any passive house projects that you're excited about, or upcoming, that maybe you want to speak to and share with us?
Sure. I mean, there's lots actually. We've got about a dozen projects in progress at the moment, or they're either in progress or on the way. And there's some really great social housing projects. Some of them are taller buildings. Some of them are these very expansive projects. We just finished a student housing. It might be student and staff. I'm not sure, but anyway, a housing project at UBC. There's this interesting rental building called the Peak that's finishing up soon, and it's been in a bunch of different. We've done some tours and things like that. It's that one, to be honest, it was really exciting to me. Because it was the introduction for our improved system, the one we worked on with the folks at Peel. So it's got the exterior color, it's got the new reinforcement system, it's got a lot of different products. So it has our certified windows, the newly certified passive house terrace doors, and it's also got a new storefront system that we came up with. So it's got aluminum clad exterior, and then all of those storefront door options that are typically near impossible to put onto the European style doors. So we actually have this barrier free solution with electronic openers and closers and panic bars and stuff like that. So,
Yeah, the hardware is often the hardest thing we hear when you're importing doors from Europe. It's like the North American hardware just doesn't fit, and door hardware consultants just lose their mind when we tell them it's going to be a passive house and the doors are a lot thicker.
yeah. Well, I get the sense that oftentimes Europeans take kind of a pragmatic approach to things. In a lot of cases, the German people tend to be very pragmatic in that way. At least my family members that are German are, where it's kind of, if you were to say, well, I'd like to have this type of hardware, that doesn't work
Yeah,
with this system. So you either have this system or you have that hardware. That's that's just the
yep.
way it goes. And
Those are
in
the
North
options.
America, yeah, we'll say, well, I want it to be fire rated. I want it to be barrier free. I want it to have a panic bar. I want it to have automatic opening and closing. I want it to be passive house rated. I want it to have all, and it's like, but it's supposed to have glass, but you can't do glass if it's fire rated, and we can't have the air tightness if it's the zero barrier threshold, so there's all these different things that fight with each other, and it's like, well, better just figure it out. And it's not that easy to figure out.
No, it's not. It's always a challenge.
Yeah.
Every project, it's the same deal. What are we using for manufacturer, and what does the door need? Because we have to start thinking about that now.
Yeah.
It's always a
So we
challenge.
got one that's not the door itself is not passive house certified, but it's in the ballpark. It's worked for several projects, and the storefront windows are passive house certified. So on the whole, I think you end up being way ahead
Oh yeah,
compared to if you had to bite the bullet and say, okay, well, let's just make the traditional aluminum
yeah.
storefront work in there.
Conventional is not ideal. So
Yeah.
It's great that you've got a better product than what would otherwise be used. So that's exciting to hear.
Yeah.
Um, so what's coming next for Innotech? Is there anything new and exciting and improved, or anything that you wanted to kind of share?
Yeah, the most exciting thing for us, I'm going to be 100% honest, nobody's given me the thumbs up on saying it, but whatever. I know that it's coming. So we've the cold climate certification on our operable window is on the way. So we will have the first Passive House certified cold climate operable window manufactured in North America, and the first cold climate certified operable PVC window manufactured in the world.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, I thought that was super exciting. Big thumbs up from the guys at Passive House International. They were actually shocked that we were able to pull that performance out of a PVC frame.
Yeah, it can be tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think our climate really drives this kind of innovation. So there is actually an opportunity in the market because the Europeans, I guess, just haven't focused on that. They don't have. I mean, I guess you can go to Sweden or whatnot and get colder climate. But yeah, the climatic challenges we face um, require just something different from us. So, but it presents an
Mhm.
opportunity.
It does. So, we're going to keep working on bringing out new products, figuring out ways to add structure so that we can do larger products, larger spans, higher wind load potential, without having big thermal impacts, things like that. So that's, you know, I think that's probably maybe not like the big news part of it. Like it might not be this huge splash, but I think that's probably the part that's going to have the biggest effect for people when you're trying to make your building model work, and all the little tiny bits and pieces. You're not getting this hit with these last minute changes. Oh, we had to add steel here, there, wherever. You say, we figure out how you're where you would normally be accounting for a bunch of steel. This is actually still going to be a certification level thermal value.
That's awesome. So I've got a couple more questions for you to round out our list of questions for the day.
Sure.
As a components manufacturer and before getting into Passive House, what did you see that wasn't working and that needed to be changed? I know you've spoken a fair bit to building the best product you can to ensure that you get the performance and the thermal properties. But was there anything else that maybe you hadn't touched on that you see that need, the gap that needed to be fixed?
We actually we're still fully behind our existing legacy line. It's a great product that works up to it. I mean, it still does work in cool temperate passive house projects, depending on the model, obviously. We certainly did see that has a kind of a limited lifespan, and trying to make a building work to a net zero level is definitely more difficult. So being able to more easily achieve your thermal targets, and then this frame is also a more universal frame to it. So the base, the actual frame of the window, it's the same frame for the window, for the door, for like there will be a whole bunch of different products where it's the same base frame system, and no shifting in between different product lines. It's kind of a more universal setup for the future.
Well, that's great. I'm sure it makes fabricating and manufacturing a lot easier if you're not constantly swapping things out to get different
It,
profiles. So.
it will.
And I guess to round out our questions for the day, what's one question you wish we asked you, and how would you have answered it?
A good question you could have asked me is oh, here's a thing that I think gets overlooked a whole bunch when it comes to the windows and doors, and I think you'll probably agree, is when it comes to the installations. The frame that we have is a fairly sizable frame, and it's actually It's that way for a couple of different reasons. One of them is obviously it's easier to get more structure when you have more material, so that allows us to eliminate some of that, the steel or whatever reinforcement. But it also allows for a heavier over-insulated detail to better isolate that installation cavity. So on a multifamily project, since that typically will be the largest thermal bridge in the entire building, either being able to drastically reduce it or eliminate it in terms of thermal bridging could have a very significant impact on your building model. So I think that's a really strong benefit to our frame if it's properly accounted for by the designer.
That's a great question that you've asked and answered. So thank you for that.
Took me a minute. Whatever.
That's all good. It took us more than a minute to generate this list of questions, so you're well within your rights there for taking some time to process that one. Okay, so earlier on in our questions, Mike, you indicated that you built a passive house with your father. And both of you, first and second generation window and door kind of gurus and guys, what was that process like? And did you have anything that you learned from your father in that process, or did he have anything that he learned from you in that process? And what was it like?
Ooh, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
It was a really interesting process, and it was a little bit last minute. We had actually not only completed the design of the home, but we actually had the permit issued before I had learned enough about passive that I decided, okay, there's no other way to go. I have to build passive. If I would regret it for the rest of my life, if I didn't. So we were already, forming up the footings, and it's like, okay, we have to start making some changes. Like let's get some insulation, and it was a completely new thing for both of us, but newer for my dad than I, because I'd at least taken a bunch of the education. And so one of my dad's great strengths is he's pretty good at letting other people kind of take the lead and saying, okay, you know what, like, you know more about this than I, so you show me the way on this, and tell me what to do. That's probably the only reason we were able to work together for so long, is he has that patience to put up with me.
Patience is very important.
It is. But building the house, to be honest, it wasn't that different than building a regular house. I mean, if you've worked in construction, and if you've built particularly something at a little bit better performance level, like working in Vancouver, they had their enhanced energy code, building R22 walls, net R22 walls. You're familiar with exterior insulation. You're familiar with HRV installations, like all this stuff. It's not really anything new. You're just doing a little bit more, and then paying way more attention to your airtight details and the wall assembly, the science of your assemblies. So most of it went pretty well. My dad, obviously, being retired, he was able to put a lot more time into it. So a lot of the actual, swinging the hammer work was, I'd say, probably 2/3. My father rather than me. I concentrated more on some of the grunt work and the finishing, the mill work, and all that kind of stuff. And then working my butt off to try and find that expertise, and it was an ongoing learning process. And even things that we thought we had figured out, sometimes we had to pull things apart and redo it when I learned something that made more sense, or I got the right advice that corrected something I maybe was taking the wrong approach, or I would just get stumped. And I think that's probably true of almost anybody. The first passive house that they build, there will be little, you might find yourself into a little dead end in the maze, and you need to pull back and try a different route. but you know, eventually you'll sort of work yourself into the center as long as you just kind of pay attention to the details.
That's great. It sounds like it was a very fun adventure to undertake, um, especially being from somebody that likes to have their hands on activities and to have that kind of like project stream to kind of focus on it. It seems like a really great learning kind of curve or experience. So
It was an awesome learning experience and also super rewarding. Like every time you do something, it's like, oh, okay, we're going to do our mid-construction blower door test, and then oh, it blew a .25, and you're like, yes, it's the first time I've ever built a house, and I killed it.
yeah,
And
So
then
there's no excuse for other builders then. Since
yeah,
they've been
no,
building for 30 years, right?
yeah, that's all I'm hearing too. So
yeah, well, it's definitely a help. Basically, my dad, you could say he was the air boss. Nobody officially marked him as the air boss, but he was the guy that was on site, and he was, you know, I know that we need to this uninterrupted air barrier, and so he'd be crawling around up there in the attic, you know, checking, and it's like, oh, I think I can see there might have been a little bit of a nick in here from something, so I'll just tape it, and I think rather than just belt and suspenders, we've got 3 layers of air seal on all the light around the light boxes and stuff like that. So, you know, he paid probably more attention than he had to, but at no point did he feel that that was wasted energy. He knew that that was going to be money in his pocket at the end of the day, over the long term.
so thank you for sharing that journey and that experience with us. It's always I always find it interesting to see and to listen to people's first experience building passive house because it's such a varying kind of experience for people. Some people really love it, and they take away a lot from the process, and some people just never want to do it again. Um, so it can be hit or miss, I find, depending on the experience for the project. So it was really great that you were able to spend that time with your father and build a project. So it was really exciting to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would totally do it again, and I would do it differently if we did it again. There'd be a bunch of things we'd change. The mechanical room would be bigger. We'd design into it. We'd have chase for the HRV system. We'd probably put a lot of things more in the actual center of the home, rather than, you know, in a convenient spot for the design.
Yeah. Yeah. The corner in the basement somewhere, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's like, oh well, traditionally it's like you want to line things up like, oh, where can we put the stuff so that your water pipes line up the best, and you can have the shortest number of runs from your hot water tank, and is also convenient in terms of design to tuck it away. So you're doing that, but it's like, nah, I'd rather have a closet in the middle of my living room so that I don't have to run those you know, the tubes as far for the HRV system. You know, I'd figure out some way to get in the dead center of the house.
Yeah, there's always like learning things, lessons learned, or things that you would do differently the second time.
Hmm.
Not necessarily like, builder's remorse or something, but it's
No,
just to have that improved efficiency and to take what you've done and the experience you've gained and to use it in a more kind of productive and efficient manner. It's always great.
exactly. Efficiency, effectiveness, um, ease of construction, and it would probably be significantly less expensive too.
Oh yeah.
Um, you know, we did a great job keeping the budget down, but we could have kept it down even further.
Awesome. So I think that rounds out the bulk of our questions that we've got. So Mike, how can people reach you if they have any questions?
Yeah, the best place to go is our website. We've got tons of materials on there. You know, projects and technical materials. That's www.innotech, Innotech -Windows.com.
Thank you, Mike, for taking the time to sit with us today. and for sharing your experience with Passive Host for our listeners. For those of you who are listening to us, you can reach us online at peelpassivehost.ca for more information on the services that we provide. This podcast was produced by Andy Lee, Andrew Peel, and Kelly Fisher, and a special thank you to our guest Mike Cairns for his time to sit down with us. So thank you, Mike. We appreciate your time and your candid answers. It's been really great.